Yes, welcome back. We're with author Peter Kling, who's written a seminal book in this area that's very timely. It's called Letters to Earth. You Can Survive Armageddon. And it seems to become very relevant with each passing hour. And Peter has a different definition of Armageddon, which we'll get into later on. Our program today. Welcome, Peter.
Thank you, Alfred. It's a pleasure to be here. Pleasure to be here.
Our program today is a special program. And today's March 27th, 2014. And we're doing a special program on the Tetra Lunar Eclipses of 2014 and 2015. And should I set some kind of stage for it, or do you want to go into it?
Well, Alfred, I've said time and time again, we live in fantastic times. We just do. These times are unprecedented. We are seeing unprecedented things happening right now in our time today. I mean, we kind of got on this subject the beginning of last July, so it's 8 months now, 9 months,
right?
Just about. And this is when we first talked about the blood moons coming. Now, who would have thought in July that we would have seen Nelson Mandela die again and get the 10 days of Mandela? Who would have thought in July that Comet Ison would have just vanished? Who would have thought in July that Russia would have invaded Ukraine and capture the Crimea without firing a shot? Interesting events, aren't they, Alfred?
Yes. Yes, they are.
Here we are on what we would call the eve of the blood moons. This is actually being recorded on March 27th. Obama, I'm sure, enjoyed his visit with the Pope today.
Right.
Very timely. Let's see, I believe Putin's visited with the Pope, now Obama. And guess who gets to go pay a visit on April 3rd? Her Majesty herself has been requested to come see the Pope.
Now, those are kind of major upper theater figures.
Isn't
that like the kind of pre-Antichrist Obama visits the false prophet Petrus Romanos, followed closely by Her Majesty, who's grandmother to the Antichrist? Is that what's kind of happening? Or, well, I mean, maybe.
We can't exactly say that the Queen is grandmother to the Antichrist. However, we can say that the Queen is grandmother to who is most likely to become the next king, indeed, king de facto of the world.
Of the world, right.
Yeah, now you see, you have to kind of follow protocol here.
I see. I kind of jumped ahead.
Yeah, it's all within the protocols, Alfred.
Oh, I see. Well, now,
not quite all of it, but a good portion of it. The protocols never talked about anything to do with any of the tetrad moons that we're seeing, and that's primarily the main focus. Here we are on the eve of this, and it's interesting.
Well, just to go, just to say, for those people who do not know, the 4 Tetra eclipses, or 4 lunar eclipses in 2014 and 2015, 2 of them are in 2014. They all fall on Jewish high holidays. In other words, Passover on April 14, 15, 2014, and Tabernacles on October 8th, 2014. And then in 2015, the Tetra Lunar Eclipses fall on Passover again, April 4th, 2015, and Tabernacles, September 28th, 2015. I'll let you talk about the solar eclipses, but the last time this happened was in 1492 when Columbus, quote, discovered America. We won't go into the Vikings and all that, but that's the last time it happened.
Yeah, it's interesting. The Jews were driven out of Spain at the same time. So, you know, maybe they say, Columbus, you get on the boat. The rest of you get out of the country. You know, it's difficult to say because history is recorded by the victors, so they say.
Right.
And, you know, that brings us to where we are now. We're watching a situation unfold in Ukraine where, and this is kind of personal for me because it was 10 years ago during the Orange Revolution. And 2004, for myself, was a very tumultuous year. A set of paradigms happened which were beyond bizarre. And it took a year to see how they would all work out. And interestingly enough, by the end of the year, I was in what I would call fight or flight mode. And so I decided, you know what, I'm gonna flight on this one. And I, for some reason, decided virtually overnight. No, I did decide this overnight to go book a trip to Ukraine, to go to Kiev. I wanted to go to Kiev. Now, between the time, now I had to get my passport renewed, I had to apply for the visa, and I booked a ticket all at the same time. Now, I figured I'd give myself enough room. It was about 2 weeks, 10 days, 2 weeks that I put this together. And within that time, the Orange Revolution broke out. So it's like, okay, well, do I go or don't I go? So I took out a $100,000 life insurance policy. My paperwork, my visa, my passport got to my house via Federal Express literally a half hour before I had to leave to go to the airport.
Wow.
And off I went. When I got to Ukraine, it was interesting, to say the least. I went through customs. It was like, wow, this smacks of Soviet Union era border crossing, you know? You had, everybody was dressed in uniform. Everybody had the military, you know, they were all military looking uniform. They weren't military, they were customs people. But there was also military there. It's the international airport for Ukraine. So, you know, it's interesting, the things that they ask you about, you know, if you brought things in. Of course, they want to know if you brought in money. If so, how much? Have you brought in jewelry, things of that nature. But anyway, this all started for me during the Orange Revolution in 2004. And it was during this time that I was told to write a book. I spent the month of December in Ukraine. And I'll tell you, I learned a lot about the people. I learned a lot about the culture. And I witnessed firsthand a revolution that changed the future of Ukraine. At least it seemed that way. Now, you know, why do I refer back to Ukraine? Okay, well, let's take a look at the situation. Putin was talked to by the Pope, Eastern Orthodox. Obama's being talked to by the Pope. Let's call it Christian fundamentalism or American Christianity. And then we go to the Queen of England, who's going to be visiting next week, and she's head of the Anglican Church. Interesting little power brokerage deal coming about, and it's all happening right at the beginning of the 4 blood moons. Now, is this the end of the world? No, it's not the end of the world, not yet. However, there are very significant things happening, and the whole purpose to have this discussion is to understand what is going on this planet now and how it relates interdimensionally, because trust me, it does. These are prophecies that were all spoken of anywhere between 1500 to between 2000 to 25 and beyond 2500 to almost 3000 years ago, prophecies of the blood moons, the moon turning to blood. The one thing which also goes along with this prophecy is the sun being darkened. And this is what makes this so outstanding. It's the first time, I'm just looking at my little chart here. It's the first time that this has ever happened. Uh, it's believed that there was a solar eclipse during the time of Jesus when he was on the earth. Was also a tetrad moon. So Jesus was essentially put to death under a tetrad moon. It's also believed that there was a solar eclipse. I don't have the access to the software to back up the clocks to see exactly what phases, what was where. So I have to go on other people's work. But anyway, that's what it is alleged to be said at that time. Now, what makes this different is that not only do we have the 4 blood moons all on Hebrew holidays, we also have the sun being darkened. And so what we are going to see is the first blood moon starting on April 15th, which is actually the end of the first day of Passover. Now, what makes this date so significant is that this is also, to the best of my knowledge, that the Hebrew month of Nisan and the 14th day, which starts Passover, they keep their days from after sundown till sundown the next day, and they run on a lunar calendar as well, not a solar calendar. But this is the first time that the Gregorian calendar, which we use to run our lives today, and the Hebrew calendar both line up on the same date, April 14th. April 14th at sundown starts Nisan 14. At the end of Nisan 14 at sundown would start Nisan 15, and that is the 15th of April when we will see the first of the 4 blood moons. Now, 15 days later, we get to see a full, well, I don't know if we'll actually see it here, but there will be a full solar eclipse. Quite interesting. Now we go to the blood moon in October, and here this falls on the Jewish holiday of or Hebrew holiday of Tabernacles, and we have a partial solar eclipse 15 days later. Moving to 2015, Nisan 1, the start of the Hebrew calendar, starts under a full solar eclipse. Nisan 14 is the next of the blood moons. So we're looking at April 2nd, I believe it is, in 2015. The last one, and that happens 15 days later, interestingly enough. The last partial solar eclipse happens in the beginning of September, September 13th, I believe it is, yes, on Rosh Hashanah. And then the last of the blood moons happens on September 28th. Interestingly enough, the next day is the most historically accepted day for the birth of Jesus. Most biblical historians will place Jesus' birth between October 29th to from September 29th to October 1st. So 29th, 30th, or the 1st. So now you got to start to scratch your head and say, okay, well, the blood moons ended. Big deal. What does that mean for us? Nothing in particular. But let's look at the world events, because we can pretty much figure that this same set of blood moons has triggered or other major events have happened at this same time. And we have a synchronicity of powers which are trying to gain control over the planet. And this might have something to do with Comet Ison evaporating before our eyes and us getting the 10 days of Mandela instead. We might be seeing an interdimensional battle of the gods. Now, the Mayans, if you rearrange the math, everybody said, oh, it's December 21st, 2012, it's going to be the end of the world. No, it was said to be the end of the long Baktun calendar. However, people have gone back and they recalculated it and they said, oh, well, look, we made a mistake. It's actually December 16th, 2013. Well, let's see. What happened on September 16th? Well, Comet Ison was supposed to be in perfect alignment between Earth and Venus. And when we would have looked at Venus in the night sky, it would have looked like a giant exclamation point. Interesting. Could that have been the feathered snake god that the Mayans talked about and the Aztecs talked about?
Mm.
Could that be a dragon returning to Earth? The dragon gods? Dragon gods. Who has dragons as their gods? See how this is starting to play out? And instead we got, well, Nelson Mandela was recorded to have died on June 26th, but he was taken off life support, and then he got better and was sent home. Or was he put on ice? And then they made the official date December 5th. 10 days later, Nelson Mandela is buried. Now let's take a look at Nelson Mandela. One-time public enemy #1 of South Africa. The apartheid government wanted this man dead, but they couldn't make a martyr out of him, so they locked him up, put him in prison. And he became basically a martyr in prison until they overthrew the apartheid government, and he was released and became a national hero. He became a Knight of Malta in the control of the reigning Pope. Now, we've got the Catholic Church involved. We've got the Vatican involved. It's the Knight of Malta. We got to give him a fair send-off. What does this Grand Knight of Malta represent? How shall we best sacrifice him? Now, I don't mean that they actually burned his body. Who knows? Maybe they did. I don't know. But we were given the official word that Nelson Mandela now officially died on December 25th, and he was entombed or interned on the 15th, the day before, in a lunar alignment at the Voortrekker Monument in South Africa. Interesting, go look at that and look at the symbology associated with that monument, and the alignment of Ison, which mysteriously disappeared. So while we heard for over a year and all eyes were on Ison as it vanished before our very eyes, we were given 10 days of Mandela. Now when you look at the symbolic imagery involved here, you look at the podium and every world speaker stood behind the symbol of the rising phoenix from the pyramid supported by the African people. There's actually 13 pyramids involved in that pyramid. And what is behind the phoenix? Behind the phoenix is the sun, Ra, the sun god, also referred to as Saturn, Raphan, Molech. Now, bring all these gods together. And what we have here is a symbolic eclipsing of the Hebrew high holidays. Okay, what do we see going on in the world? Well, and we said this 9 months ago, back in July, we got to see on 3/13/13, a date which came to me back in around 10/10/10, with all the New Age postings on my wall. I got frustrated one day and I said, yeah, I understand 10/10/10. I got 11/11/11. I even understand 12/12/12, but what I'm concerned about is 3/13/13 and 4/14/14, and had no basis for saying it. It's not like I looked that up for any reason. I just, hey, Rocky, watch me pull a rabbit out of my hat. And I couldn't find anything for 3/13/13, but I came across the tetrad moon when I went and did the research on the 4/14/14, and how this event is different than all the other ones because it also involves the eclipsing of the sun. What does this mean? How are the powers to be going to take what is going on? Well, on 3/13/13, we got the first ever Jesuit Pope. And most interestingly enough, also, last year we got Karen Hughes, a whistleblower for the World Bank that said, oh, the Jesuits have a stranglehold on the banking system of the world. Well, at least the banking system of China, and we see what's happened with China. But now, wait a minute. As I recall, wasn't it Henry Kissinger, Ashkenazi Jew, who started to put the ties together to bring China into the most favored nation trading status of the United States, something that was never done before back during the Nixon administration? The Knights Templar have two riders on the same horse for a reason. They controlled the banking system back then, from the 11th century on, essentially. They controlled the banking system back then, and nothing has changed in 1,000 years. They are still controlling the banking system today. Follow the money. So what does the first Jesuit Pope do? It seems he's made his order of business to bring an end to the debt system. And in May, he gets up and he announces to the world that people have been made a slave to the debt system, and it really needs to end, and it's got to go away. And then he brings it up again in September. He says the debt system can no longer be putting "In God We Trust" on their money. Gee, what currency does that? The Federal Reserve note puts "In God We Trust" on their money? Do you mean the petrodollar? Yeah, that's the one. Because they have made money their god and have used it as a tool to enslave the people. October 3rd, he issues a 41-page treatise on ending the debt system. Now, back to Ukraine on the eve of the blood moons. Also on the eve of the blood moons, the summoning of the heads of state of, well, Putin was earlier. There's a constant relationship that goes on with Putin. That seems to, Putin got the good pat on the head boy and the attaboy from the Pope during the Syrian situation back at the G20 summit in September. So, you know, him and the Pope are running in sync. Why do you think there wasn't a shot fired over Crimea? Why do you think the United States didn't roll up a bunch of aircraft carriers and beat the bad Russians back? What was it Obama said? I have more leeway. I can do more things. He said this to Putin. I have more leeway after the election. Yeah, it's after the election, no doubt about that. And now we see sanctions, not missiles, sanctions coming against Russia. We see Russia saying, hey, bring your sanctions. We'll raise the price of our gas, and we'll trade with our most favored trading partners, the BRICS countries, of which there are about 35 plus or minus that are all have free trade agreements between them. The largest ones, BRICS was what the acronym is: Brazil, Russia, India, China, and again, where does it bring us? South Africa. Oh yeah, 10 days of Mandela, that's right. So you see how this is working together? It's starting to gel. And so now, here's an interesting thing. I just read a report. You know how you tell that the dollar's collapsing? You look at the gold, and it's like, well, gold's been going down the past couple of days. Look at silver. Silver's been going down the past couple of days. You know, we saw gold close to $1,800 an ounce. Well, it's down trading, or getting into $1,200. Silver is down around $20 an ounce now. And so here, if the dollar was really collapsing, wouldn't this stuff be taken off? Yeah. if it wasn't artificially being suppressed by the City of London, which is one of the three independent city-states of the world and does not come under the jurisdiction of England or Great Britain or the Queen. Interestingly enough, if the Queen wants to do business in official business in the City of London, she needs to get the mayor's permission first, or they can actually chop her head off. Yeah, it's an archaic rule, but it stands. She had, before she can address Parliament, carry on any sort of interaction with the government in the City of London, she needs permission from the mayor. So there you go. The other two independent city-states are Washington, D.C., of course, which is no part of the United States of America, and the Vatican, which is the independent city-state of Rome. Interestingly, of which we're not on this subject tonight, but that there are also prophecies in Daniel which refer to all of these and a coming beast with iron teeth that leaves nothing but a path of destruction in its wake. Okay, we'll keep an eye out for that one. It seems the Bible's full of these different beasts, and here's the thing. Beasts represent governments. What do you mean? The Russian bear, the American eagle, the British lion. Go look at the different countries of the world, and you know, you don't see too many putting up a hummingbird or a dove. You know, there's some symbol of strength or power. And you have to look at the symbols behind all this. You know, if I held up a swastika in the Western culture, people would go nuts and they'd be calling me an anti-Semite. I can hold it up in the Far East and people would say, oh, you're a Buddhist. What do you want me to tell you? Are they one and the same? Look at what does it mean? It's a sun symbol. Where does the sun symbol lead us back to? All goes back to ancient Egypt, is where the story starts in the scriptures. Now, it actually, historically, goes back to the Sumerians, and interestingly enough, guess who? The Anunnaki. Because it's the Anunnaki that give man, modern man, where the birth of civilization comes from, it's the Anunnaki that give us what? Religion and government. The two most controlling factors on the face of the earth, both built on a house of lies. When's the last time you heard an honest politician? Isn't that an oxymoron? When's the last time you would you trust your child to a priest? Hey, Father, can you watch Billy for a little bit? I gotta go shopping. Not on your life. Why? Why? Oh, well, let's see. Hundreds, no doubt, of millions of dollars of child molestation lawsuits around the world. The Vatican and members thereof found guilty of child molestation, child trafficking, and every other thing to do with the abuse of children, as so the Queen of England and the Anglican Church. And Kevin Annett is doing a fantastic job exposing all this, and they have been found guilty in the People's Public Court of Brussels. It's not, are they guilty? No, they have been found guilty of these charges. Has Bush been found guilty of war crimes? Has Cheney been found guilty of war crimes? Alfred, you sat on 3 tribunals that I know of. What weight does that carry?
Well, under natural law, it carries some weight.
Yeah, under natural law. So now you're involved with a political situation in the Far East, and you have Kevin Annett and his group involved in a religious situation in the West, and there are your two witnesses against religion and government and the lies and the murder that it's committed. and still committing today. So when people say, "Oh, well, what about the two witnesses?" There you are. You got one in the West that's turned around and indicted the religious system, and you've got one in the East which has indicted the government system. And here we are sitting on the eve of the blood moons. Now, what do you think is going to happen?
Yeah. Now, are you referring to something in specific when you say the two witnesses?
Yeah, there's another prophecy within Revelation. It's these two witnesses that they try to kill.
Oh.
Yeah, you see, they don't want the truth exposed.
So you're saying
they do their best.
So your hypothesis is that Kevin Annett of the International Common Law Court of Justice and Alfred Weber of the Kuala Lumpur Tribunal are these two witnesses? Is that what you're saying?
No. I'm not saying that you two personally.
Oh, not personally.
But the groups involved.
Oh, the groups involved.
The groups involved. It's not that either one of you has the total evidence.
Yeah.
But both the tribunal and the trial in Brussels both brought guilty verdicts.
Yeah. Well, actually. There's a forthcoming trial. The trial in Brussels is starting at the beginning of April, around April 7th. So the trial in Brussels is going to be going on right during the first blood moon.
Isn't that kind of symbolic, Alfred? Who set that one up? Whose idea was that?
No, it was supposed to start earlier, but the Vatican dispatched.
Wait a minute. One more time.
The Vatican.
Okay.
The Vatican dispatched a team to disrupt the trial. This is the same team that of Vatican assassins that murdered Pope John Paul I, and that was responsible for assassinating Roberto Calvi and all the people associated with the Vatican Bank. And they've been dispatched to Brussels to try and break up the trial of Pope Francis, of the Superior General of the Jesuits, and of the Archbishop of Canterbury, which was going to start on March 31st. So now the trial has been postponed for about a week because we're have had to resettle it and bring on extra security. But that's the level of gaming that's going on.
Yeah. Now, do you see how we're working it on an interdimensional level?
Yeah.
This is not just happening in our 3 dimensions here.
Exactly.
This is an interdimensional game. Alfred, one time the Earth was the center of the universe and the sun revolved around the Earth. One time the Earth was flat, and if you went too far, you'd fall off the edge. And one time, you were only 3-dimensional, but in fact, now you find out you're at least 10. Wow. Yeah, humans are 10-dimensional beings. Everything within our universe, everything which we know of and exists, that exists within our 3-dimensional boundaries are only here because at least 7 other dimensions exist. Now, how can I bring this together to kind of prove that we are multidimensional beings? Let's look at the operating speed of the brain. When right now, in our conversation, I'm going to assume, because we're both paying attention to what's going on, that we are both in beta. We're listening quickly, we're talking. I am certainly not talking very slow. If I was an alpha, my voice would be slowing down, and I would be talking more softly. But I'm not. I'm excited. I'm talking in beta because this stuff is important. And it's in beta where we are in the fight or we run away. We are in the flight mode. And so we spend the vast majority of our conscious and awake time during our whole lives in beta. In other words, we are either ready to fight or we're ready to run. Or we sit around bored out of our minds sometimes, daydreaming about maybe going on a vacation. Maybe we're astute enough to realize that there's a higher power, and so, we pray. Maybe we realize that we're actually part of that higher power, and so we meditate. And doing that, and something I know every single one of us does, is that we love to be in loving relationships. And so now, once we move ourselves out of the beta, which is our brain vibrates at in beta above 14, above 15, 16 cycles per second and up. From there down to about 10 cycles per second or so, we go into theta. Now, if you're sitting back, with someone that you dearly, sweetly love, and you're relaxed and cuddling, maybe watching a movie, I'm going to guess that you're probably an alpha. If you're in the other room, just the two of you, and you're engaged in a fantastic, passionate lovemaking session, I'll promise you that you are an alpha. When you start to fall asleep, when you start to meditate, and when we pray, it is an automatic trigger to put our minds in alpha. So now, this is where we first start to connect with the interdimensional you. Now, it's interesting, when we fall in love, when we are in a loving relationship with someone, and that relationship turns into a sexual bond, and the two become one, it's interesting, on that level of alpha, the two are really working as one. They become of one mind. They're experiencing the same thing at the same time, and we call it bliss and love. And that's alpha. Now, if you're thinking about that vacation, as I mentioned, you're sitting back with a cup of coffee, maybe, sitting in your easy chair, staring out the window, daydreaming about your significant other. You're going to be an alpha, and you're making pictures in your mind. Now go into a deeper state of alpha, and you go into theta. And theta, our brain cycle, from 10 to about 4 cycles per second. Now, interestingly enough, the Earth cycles between theta and alpha. The actual rhythm, the synchronicity of the Earth vibrates between theta and alpha. And when we are in theta, we can now turn around and go look through time and space, and we're not mentally limited to our third dimensional world. Of course, it helps if you have your eyes closed while you're doing this and not driving or trying to carry on some sort of activity, because if you are, you'll never get there. And if you're there carrying on an activity, you get ready to have an accident. They just don't go hand in hand. You have to be in a calm, relaxed state. We do this every night several times when you're sleeping. We go back through the dream cycle. But it's in theta that we can do remote viewing. And we can remote view anything in future, past, and anything beyond the third dimension. We can remote view in other dimensions, yes, if you know where to remote view. It's like if I said, oh, well, if I tell you about this island and you've never heard about it before, I said, oh, well, it's like this, and I start describing something, and it starts sounding like the island of Bora Bora, where it's like paradise on earth. Now you've got a mental picture, you see. So now you're putting that alpha to work at that point. You're putting these pictures in your mind. Go down on a lower level of mind, and now you can mentally view what's going on in that island. Go into delta, and you can have a lucid dream or an out-of-body experience, and you can walk around on the island. Pick up the sand, smell the air, hear the ocean. For all intents and purposes, you are there. That's how we're going to learn how to create wormholes in the future, by using our mind. Perfect DNA first. We got to get over the hump. That's one of the things that we're looking forward to. If you can imagine it, you can do it. Picture yourself there at the right level. Will have the ability one day, and just take my word for it, that we will actually be able to change our vibration at the atomic level and go from right, manifest our thoughts physically in another place within the third dimension. Talk about time travel, huh? Instantaneous, because thought is instantaneous, and that's the only way it's capable of getting from here to Alpha Centauri. Even traveling at the speed of light, you're going to come back 4.4 years older, and your children are going to be dead, and your grandchildren are going to be in their 60s. Speed of light travel doesn't work. Warp speed even takes time. Thought is instantaneous. Step through the wormhole. I've seen an entity instantaneously appear before me and stop a deer from coming through the windshield of my car while I was traveling at over 60 miles an hour. Yeah. How's that for instantaneous Johnny on the spot? I named him George. I figured, hey, out of respect of the move from the movie or the novel of Mice and Men. You know, he appears, I'm going wherever he takes me to. I appreciate the life saving. Not only saved my life, but my son was with me at the time too, and that would have just been a bloody mess. But we both lived to talk about it, and so did the deer, amazing enough. So we are not alone in this, and that is one of the things that we have to understand. We are interdimensional beings in physical vessels, put in the third dimension to experience life here on Earth. This planet was seeded, and when we go back to the scriptures, that's exactly what it tells us. Well, there's just a little bit more. It doesn't come out and say, oh, well, Earth was seeded. What it says was that God created man, created man, both male and female, and put them on the earth, and he gave them the commandment to be fruitful, become many, and fill the planet, and to have it in subjection. So now this was the grand directive. This was the prime directive toward planet Earth. And so now we have two perfect human specimens, one directly created from the elements, from the actual elements of the stars themselves, the dust of the ground. The other one, the female, is a biological clone according to the scriptures. When you read the account in Genesis, the 2nd chapter, even Adam says, this is flesh of my flesh, bone of my bone. This one was taken from me. Well, he didn't say this is my clone because they didn't have the word clone back then. But when you read the account, this is exactly what happens. A tissue sample is removed. They build a woman from it. They bring the woman to Adam and say, hey, have fun. Wow, she's just like me. You know, what more would you want in a woman? And she's perfect. So now you set up the... Now here's the interesting paradigm. Using the current biological paradigm of a healthy female human, every healthy female human is born with approximately 400,000 eggs in her ovaries. So, now if Eve had perfect human DNA and didn't die, she'd be about 6,000 years old now, and she'd only be about 17% through her reproductive cycle. Now, Alfred, if I had a disagreement with you, and I upset you, and you know, it came to like fisticuffs, don't you think Grandpa's going to step in and say, come on, boys, let's go talk to Adam. He'll settle this. You know, think about it. The whole lineage of this planet would still be here. Would we have wars? No, it'd be one family. We'd be what kind of condition would we be in? Well, was there an account of a perfect human being on this planet? Oh, yeah. In the Gospels, John, Mark, Luke, and it's funny, talking about the royal family, I wanted to go down the Paul, Ringo, John. Well, anyway, let's get back on track. When you go back to the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. You get them all? Yeah. When you go back to the Gospels and read the accounts of Jesus, well, let's just look at this. Let's say, okay, they are accurate accounts. How does it start off? An extraterrestrial angel, Gabriel, shows up before a young Hebrew woman who's of the house of David. She can track her lineage all the way back to the house of David, which means that she's part of the Abrahamic covenant, and therefore can be tracked back to the house of Judah and back to Abraham himself, who was a friend of Yahweh, as we are told in Genesis. Now, this extraterrestrial, interdimensional, comes before, and he's mentioned before in the Hebrew scriptures, in the book of Daniel, when he brings a message about the Hebrew people, about the future of the nation of Israel, while they are under the control of the Persian Empire, interestingly enough. And when Gabriel brings the message at this time, he says, I had a wrestling with the Prince of Persia. He wouldn't let me pass. Now, this wasn't the physical Prince of Persia. This was an extraterrestrial, an interdimensional Prince of Persia. And he says, I had to go get Michael, the Archangel, the foremost one, and he's now fighting the Prince of Persia. Will I deliver the message? Well, that must mean that the Prince of Persia is pretty darn powerful, wouldn't you say? What about the Prince of the Vatican? What about the Prince of the United Kingdom? What about the Prince of the United States? Because when Gabriel left, said, look, I got to go back and fight the Prince of Persia. And look, the Prince of Greece is coming, which means that there was probably a Prince of Rome. And you see, now we're dealing with interdimensional extraterrestrial life forms. Oh, wow, yeah. Who did the genetic engineering back in Genesis? Answer that question, you got half the answer solved. My personal opinion is Jesus should have got a better set of contractors when he had the biological engineering of the third dimension done, because the ones that he got hijacked us. That's what it comes down to. So you get the Galactic Federation Light, who half the people believe is true, and the other half believes is a hoax, coming back saying, "Oh well, see, Lucifer is our leader, and we are your creators." There might actually be some truth to that. Some of them might be part of the genetic engineers that are responsible for the genetic engineering of life on this rock, as well as every other Earth-type planet in the third dimension within the universe. They're out there. NASA is telling us that according to their studies, 20% of the planets that they are finding around these stars are within the Goldilocks zone or within the Earth habitable zone. And now let's work on the dynamics. 20%. Well, how many hundreds of billions of stars are there in the Milky Way? And then how many hundreds of billions of galaxies are there in the galaxy? And we know by the nebulas that they're still forming. The universe is still growing. If it wasn't growing, the nebulas wouldn't be forming. The universe, the third dimension of which we are a fractal thereof. If you don't know this, folks, if you didn't learn this back in Biology 101, they're all critters all crawling all over you right now, inside and out. Some of them beneficial, some of them not so beneficial. Some of them are fighting others. If you have cancer, you got a bunch of bad ones, and they want to kill you. Now, most of the time you don't even know this war's going on in your body, because you're involved with everything in this dimension outside, not the microscopic dimension on the inside. So in essence, just as this planet is hosts to billions of life forms, we ourselves are host to billions of life forms. No doubt there are other planets much like Earth, none with humans on them. Do aliens exist on other planets? I'm going to say no. And the reason I'm going to say no is because of the record brings this as being, well, let's put it this way, certainly no human life form. And the edict was given out by interdimensionals, not three-dimensionals. And it was for us to fill the Earth. Starting point right here, this planet. It's a prison planet right now. We can't get off. Can we? Can't go anywhere, at least not three-dimensionally. However, when you go into Delta, you can go anywhere you want. Now, here's an interesting thing. I was in a coma, and I can document this. I was in a coma, Westchester County Hospital. It'll be 20 years ago in November. While I was in a coma, I heard a voice. Now, I was still at a level of consciousness. I was in Delta. If you're in a coma or in a deep sleep, not dead, you are in Delta. And while I was in this coma in Delta, there was a distinct voice that came to me and said, "Come with me." And the next thing I knew, I was zipped about 100 miles away, 7,500 miles away. And I was looking down at the birth of my youngest child. And I saw the whole experience. And the whole time I was watching this, actually cognizantly being there. Because it wasn't just my imagination. Something said, "Come with me." And it stayed with me through the birthing process. Now, as soon as the baby was born, zip, I went back and I was in my body. I was back in Westchester County Hospital. And I remember laying there feeling happy and content. Now, some hours later, I don't know exactly how many hours, I regained consciousness. And my mother was standing over me. And I said, "Ma, call so-and-so, she had the baby." And my mother just had the most confused look on her face. She really did. And she said, "Okay." And she left. And I passed back out. And when I came to again, there's Mom standing over me, and she said, "Congratulations, you have a son." Now, I can document that. I can document that because as long as you trust what Mom says, I can document it. I can document that I was in the hospital. I can document that I was in a coma. I can document the time of it and the birth of my youngest child. And when you go back, I'm sure you can find the phone records which would document the call from the hospital to my fiance who had our child. So it can be documented all the way down the line. And I love when those type of things can happen, because I can tell you, hey, I saw this happen, and if I don't have the documentation, it doesn't mean anything. So we live in this multi-dimensional world, and I'm not so special. I just learned to use what I have. And you remember back there was one famous Russian weightlifter. I forgot what his name was. This was like back in the 70s or 80s. The whole world fell in love with this guy. He was just so big and massive and powerful. It was like he could pick up 400 pounds, you know, in one big huge jerk, and then put it up above his head. And it's like, you know, he didn't say one day, "I'm going to just go pick up 400 pounds. You know, this isn't the proverbial 98-pound weakling, but when it comes to using the alpha, the theta, and the delta, which takes us out of the three-dimensional physical world, a lot of us are the 98-pound weaklings, and it's time to hit the gym. I don't know how else to put it. You know, we need to make that spiritual connection, and that brings us back into this connection with God and the actual point in which we're living in. And the reason why I bring up God, and it's not just any God, because wait a minute, let's see, if Ison was the Mayan and the let's call it the Mesoamerican feathered snake god, then we just saw him get killed. If the rising phoenix and the sun and the 13 triangular Egyptian pyramid supported by the continent of Africa is the rising of an Egyptian power during the same time period. Interesting, there are no coincidences, folks. Everything happens for a reason. That's why we walk around sometimes and say, "I knew that was going to happen." Don't be at the end of the rope and turn around and have to say, "Oh, I knew that was going to happen," because then you only have one hand left holding and you're going to slip and fall off. Start preparing now. Use the mental muscle that's here to connect in the spiritual or in the interdimensional world, and be careful who you connect with. And that's why prayer is so important, the connection back to Yahweh, Yahuwah, Jehovah. There's so many, you know, it's funny. You look at I used to live near West Point, New York. I had a photography business for a while, shot several weddings in the West Point chapel. And when you look at the stained glass window, you know, when you leave the altar and walk out of the chapel and you look up, it says Jehovah there in one big burst. It's like, no joke. You guys know. So there's no atheists in foxholes. They all know the name of God. And when you go back to the scriptures, there's several that say that you have to know the name in order to be saved. Now, the ancient Hebrew name, as I was taught by an ancient Hebrew linguist, is Yahuwah. There was no V sounding word in ancient Hebrew. So Yahuwah is as close as they can get to what the Tetragrammaton is. But it's the definition which is more interesting, and that is, a lot of people say, well, it's the I am. Yep. I am everything that exists. Yahuwah, Yahweh, Jehovah, he who causes to become. I am everything that exists. So now, if you are in sync mentally with the planet and you are vibrating at the same speed, you're in theta and alpha, you're not up in beta, you're in theta and alpha if you're vibrating with the planet. Guess what vibration the planet is vibrating at? It's at this same vibration that's going on where? In the whole multiverse. Everything runs on vibrations right down to the molecular level, and the energy that drives the molecules, which is where they get string theory and where the God particle resides. So hence, yes, God resides in all of us, because you can't destroy energy. You can only change its form. Now, there's a difference between the ancient gods who hijacked the human race back when it was first seated on this planet and are now coming back as aliens or extraterrestrials. They're not really coming back as interdimensionals. But you know, here's an interesting thing, Alfred. Let me ask you a question. Have you ever heard of anybody patting an interdimensional on the back, shaking their hand, saying, attaboy? Have you ever heard of an interdimensional being, or an alien, an ET, being touched by any of these whistleblowers who have come out and said, oh yeah, aliens exist, I've seen them? There's no physical touching that goes on because they're not actually physical in order. We can't see them. Doesn't mean they're not totally physical. We cannot see the energy. Now, some people identify with this. As a matter of fact, unfortunately, a new Facebook friend just wound up in a psychiatric ward because of interdimensional life forms, poltergeists, demonic attack. Oh, you're nuts. That doesn't happen. That stuff's crazy. Yeah, so you're crazy. You need to go to a rubber room for a while. It does happen. Whether it's voluntary or not is another story. Interesting correlation. The Hindu religion says that there are 330 million gods and demigods. Revelation doesn't get that precise. It just says that there are 300 million, and a third of them have turned rebellious, and that's where we're at. So now we have the interdimensional situation going on, plus the three-dimensional situation manifesting itself here. Remember, as above, so below, the old Egyptian saying? And it's interesting that the Abrahamic covenant starts actually, Abraham was from Ur, which is now part of Iraq, which would have put him near the Euphrates River into what would have been ancient Samaria, and he was brought down into Egypt. And it's where the story of the Exodus starts, really where Genesis leaves off and Exodus begins. And so now we're in this time period where we've got the Galactic Federation of this and the United Federation of that, and the Palladians, and all of these different groups showing up here on Earth. And boy, you know, you look at the ancient Sumerians and the Egyptians, they worshipped everything. They had a god for everything that existed. And so when in Exodus, now an interesting thing here, uh, the uh, the Abrahamic covenants gets brought down into Egypt through Israel, Jacob, and Joseph, who becomes the second most powerful person in Egypt. And it is his family, the Israelites, which populate Lower Egypt, known as the land of Goshen, because they were sheep herders and cattle herders, and they didn't want to be offensive to the people in Upper Egypt, which is where the ruling class was. Now, interestingly enough, the pyramid on the Great Plateau of Giza, the Great Pyramid of Giza, is in Lower Egypt. And I'm going to mention this now while it's on my mind. When you read the events of the 9th plague, the sun is darkened for 3 days. Yahweh tells Moses, or Yahuwah tells Moses, command the sun to become darkened. And so Moses does this, and the sun immediately becomes darkened. They didn't see it coming. They didn't see it coming. Interesting. And the account says that Upper Egypt was in total darkness. But in Lower Egypt, all of the Israelites' houses had lights in their dwellings. And now you think back of the Great Pyramid of Giza as being an energy transmitting device. And who is giving the energy? Ah, now there's a correlation. The Great Pyramid of Giza comes into play here. And when you look at the Great Pyramid of Giza and examine it via the pyramid inch, one can only admit that the Great Pyramid of Giza is not Egyptian, but indeed it is Judeo-Christian. And the timeline of the pyramid brings us right to the events of Jesus' death, the events of 1914 and the outbreak of World War I, and what is believed to be the time when this life form we know, this interdimensional, very powerful one now, who's ruling as king in the other 7 dimensions, not here in the 3rd dimension yet. This is dimensional. That happened in 1914. We got the First World War, mechanized war, chemical war, and wholesale killing. We got war that issued death on a level never before seen, only to be followed by more war, actually to be followed by famine and plague. The Spanish influenza is believed to have killed as many as 100 million people. They kind of stopped counting on that one too, and they don't know because it was even found in the most remotest of areas which did not keep records of people's death. So, you know, it's believed to have been as high as 100 million right after the First World War. You had famine and food shortages after the First World War because of the events of the First World War. And that was only followed by the Second World War, which was even bloodier, which then took our technology into thermonuclear warfare and brought it to the point of total annihilation of all life on Earth, thankfully of which we have not experienced, at least not to this point.
Now, let me jump in here, because we're quite advanced in this segment so far, and I'd like to bring this back to the Tetra Eclipses. Let me go through and just mention the Tetra Eclipses of the 20th century, and then ask you about what's going to happen in these 4 eclipses coming up. In 1917, there were 7 eclipses in 1917 when World War I ended, and it ended up with the Balfour Declaration opening up Palestine for the return of the Jews. Okay, number 1. I'm not putting any value judgment of
No,
good
no,
or
go ahead.
bad. I'm just
Please.
saying objectively fact.
Please.
In 1948, between 1948 and 1950, there were 4 lunar eclipses, tetras, on the high holidays when Israel became a nation again. Okay? Now, there are also war crimes associated with that, but I'm just saying that that's what occurred in 1948.
There's a duality.
Yeah,
there's
yeah.
a duality.
Okay.
Okay.
1967, let me finish the sequence. 1967, between 1967 and 1968, there were 4 lunar eclipses, tetras, on Jewish high holidays, and 1967 is the war that Israel won, and where Israel regained control of Jerusalem. 1973, there were 7 eclipses in 1973, which was the year of the Yom Kippur War, which Israel won again. 1996, there were 2 lunar eclipses, both on feast days of Passover and Tabernacles, and that was the 3,000th year anniversary of David entering Jerusalem, supposedly. Now, so let's fast forward to now, April 14th, 15th, 2014, the Tetra Eclipses of 2014 to 2015. We just had all these anomalies occur. Israel recalls all of its ambassadors, 102 ambassadors.
Yeah, the cover story is for that they went on strike.
Yeah. Really, give me a break. And so let's look at this from a dimensional point of view. In your judgment, what is occurring during these 2 years of the Tetra Eclipses?
Okay, let's bring this right back to where we started off with Ukraine and with what's going on in the Vatican. And let's take some information from Carol Yudes too, because they're trying to debunk Karen right now, and they're feeding her some disinformation, I believe, which is leading her down some odd paths. But that's okay. She brought up one interesting point, and I would have to believe she would know, being an attorney and in her position with the World Bank, and that would be what the Jesuit involvement is within the Chinese banking system, or any banking system for that matter, because it seems that she's focused all of her displeasure or all of her whistleblowing on the Jesuit banking system. Wait a minute, there's 2 riders on this horse, right? Who owns the bank? The Federal Reserve. Well, when you look at the Federal Reserve petrodollar, you now have all of the I don't want to quite use that term, but you have the Zionist banking powers that are backing that part of the banking system. Now, when you go back to the events of what leads up to going back to forming the Knights Templar and going to Jerusalem, and it's something that I wrote about in Letters to Earth, how did they know that there was something worth going back for, and how did they know that there was something to dig for and where to dig for it at? You see, somebody had to know. The information had to be passed down from generation to generation, and it had to be the last people who were on there, which goes back to the 1st century Zionists that were looking for a king to end the rule of Rome. To end the rule of Rome. To end the rule of the Vatican? Huh. Here we go. So the Vatican, through the Jesuit powers, with our Jesuit Pope, who is actually supposed to be just a figure face and the real evil guy, who looks like the evil Lord from Star Wars. There is said to be still in power. I don't know. Good for them. Whatever. I'm looking at the prophecies and how it affects us. Okay, and so now their power stream is still set up. They call all the heads of state in who matter in what's going on in Ukraine. Okay, raise the stakes. The dollar is overextended, and so is the debt system. The Jesuit Pope in control of the Jesuit banking system, wants to end the debt system. And now, interestingly enough, 2 days after this missing flight 370, it is said that the powers that have been holding these large trust funds in gold and silver, interestingly enough, in Kuala Lumpur, they were supposed to have had the wet signing of the issuance of this, the release of these funds to the people of the world. You mean we're going to have money that's actually backed by something? Well, that's their plan. So now think about that event with what we could call the East, the families that like the dragons, as opposed to the ones in South Americans that like the feathered snakes. I'm not sure that flying snakes or feathered snakes and dragons is much of a difference there, but we saw one faction symbolically get wiped out and power transferred by the people of the world on an interdimensional level, because it was all of their positive power being paid to the 10 days of Mandela. They were putting their spiritual power into the rising of that entity. Interdimensional, above and below, work on an unseen plane here. So now we've got these power structures which seemingly right now are more controlled by the Vatican. And it seems to be in the hands of Russia, NATO, the European Union, and the United States, all part of what we could call Christendom, all part of the Christian alliance of nations answering to the Pope, all at odds with each other. Why? To end the Zionist petrodollar. That's the first thing that we have to be careful of. The ending of the petrodollar. And that's already started. It actually started a year ago, last September, when China formally agreed with Russia to directly purchase oil from Russia, and they were going to be paying in the Chinese yuan, which they were quietly backing with gold at the time. Yeah, they've made that move. So you've got two BRICS countries set up with an oil agreement. China has the right to buy all the oil, everything that Russia can produce out of those deep Siberian wells is essentially all headed to China for refinement and distribution to the world. Bottom line. And they're not doing it with US dollars. If they did it with US petrodollars, then technically China would have to go and say, okay, I got to buy $1 trillion petrodollars so I can then turn around and buy $1 trillion dollars worth of oil products from Russia and pay that in US petrodollars. They just, 18 months now, no petrodollars used, sucking on the oil out of Russia, and we see a crack in the petrodollar. Here's a big crack. So far, this is the end of March, so far food prices in the United States, or I should say, this is based on the commodities market, up 19%. 19% in the first quarter. You are going to be paying more at the grocery store. 2 days ago, I bought a 25-pound bag of rice. About a year ago, I bought a 25-pound bag of rice. That 25-pound bag a year ago cost me about $16.99. 2 days ago, it was $22 and change. Oh, nothing wrong with the dollar. Gold looks good. Gold looks real good. Stock market's doing good. Yeah. And if you got teenage boys, I wish you the best. Lots of love and blessings to you, because your food bill is astronomical. So, these are the things that we have. This is our first concern.
Right. So we have about 15 minutes left, and I just really want to get through these specifics of the transitions that are occurring in the Tetra Eclipses. So one is that the economic systems are going to be shifting.
Yeah.
So exiting.
Absolutely.
So on the other side of the Tetra eclipses, what do you think we're going to have from
Well,
a financial point of view?
Peace and security.
I see.
Peace and security. The nations will declare peace and security, and then the end will be instantly upon them, just as the pangs of distress of a pregnant woman. First Thessalonians chapter 5. It kind of starts right there in verse 1, but the declaration about peace and security is in verse 3. It says, whenever it is that they are saying peace and security, then sudden destruction is to be instantly upon them, just as the pangs of distress upon a pregnant woman. Now, Alfred, you know, when a woman goes into labor, she doesn't just pop out a kid. It's a process, right? It's a process. So, we have to see the end of the debt system. We have to see it be replaced by something. If what they're doing in Kuala Lumpur now, which is being overshadowed this time by where did Flight 370 go, and there's a whole backstory to that happening at the same time as what's going on in Ukraine. Are you kidding me? Come on. The whole world is on Flight 370. Nothing else matters to the world right now. Yet, Ukraine just got invaded. During the beginning of this whole incident, or 2 days after this flight goes missing, it said that they released the equivalent of $6 million to every man, woman, and child on the planet. Now, it's supposed to be paid out in installments of $1,800 a month. Now, here in the United States, $1,800 a month may not sound like a whole lot. Now, there's also an electronic currency to go along with it. So, guess what? You can now turn around and trade your stock in gold using Bitcoin. Well, not exactly Bitcoin, but an electronic currency for which Bitcoin is the shakeout for. So once the petrodollar is totally collapsed, becomes useless, and this is what we have to pay attention to. Stock up on food. If you got a 401k plan, guess what? It's going to become useless. This is the first emergency, but this is going to change, because once they release this other money, now there's a healing that takes place. Oh, look, it isn't the doom and gloom. Oh, this is the new world order that they're giving us, because you're going to have to sign up. You're going to have to get your fair share. You're going to have that identification, that mark of the wild beast, or you will not be able to buy nor sell, because your U.S. petrodollars will be totally worthless. You will now have to get on the new electronic currency system, which is backed by this gold that's supposed to exist in the Far East. And then there's supposed to be more families which are supposed to be dumping in more gold to this. And so, oh, wow. You know, now I sort of say that's $1,800 isn't a whole lot in the United States. For a family of four, it's a decent income, puts you above the poverty level. You can go have a vacation. You can live comfortably. But if you're a family of 10 in a place like Bangladesh, oh my Lord, you just hit the jackpot. You are king of the world. You are living on top of everything. And you will scream peace and security. Your dreams have been answered. Thank you, whatever. You see this going on, Alfred? You see what releasing this money would do, how it would change the paradigm of the world?
Yeah, and
so here we go into this area of peace and security.
Yeah.
But it's going to be a new world of government, and people will have to buy into it. It's going to be the hoodwink. Oh, your dollar's not worth anything anymore. So
basically, it's allied with the transhumanist agenda.
Not yet. Not yet.
I see.
Okay, well, yeah, it kind of is. We're going to make the world a better place to live.
If you're chipped, it's allied with the transhumanist agenda.
Yes, exactly. But we haven't reached the lie point yet.
I see.
Because there's going to be a culling. Expect some sort of bioengineered release. Probably toward the end of 2015 would be my guess, but who knows? We're dealing with maniacal idiots here, so anything can almost happen at any time. But going along with this, we're looking at the collapse of the dollar. We're looking at the replacement. Now, in a time of peace and security, and here Here's where, what I said earlier about uh, Kevin Annett and about what's gone on in Kuala Lumpur. Here's an attack against the governmental system again. And out of an attack comes chaos, and out of chaos comes order. Order out of chaos. So we got to go through a period of chaos first with the collapse of the dollar, and then we're going to go through the big period of chaos later on, after the peace and security. But what's going to happen in this period of time? I bet you the world would love to see dear sweet Queen Elizabeth step down from the throne, and love to see the face of Diana take her place, and see William ascend to the throne along with his bride and young Prince George to lead the way into the 20th century and the transhumanist agenda. And you see now in this arrangement, we have to look at, okay, is Kevin Annett still being is what he is doing? Well, he has to be, and here's the reason why. The United Nations has also picked up this issue of child abuse, which involves the Vatican, and so now they're investigating it. Once the United Nations picks up, now you've got the seven-headed, ten-horned wild beast involved in the investigation. Now, not a lot of people know this, but it's out there on the internet. They're looking at it more from a child abuse situation. Considering the world is full of children, the church may not be the safest place for children to go, considering the vast amount of abuse. And it's interesting that the United Nations Charter allows religion to exist, provided it is not a safety to the public. I mean, a danger to public safety. Well, gee, what about all that Islamic warrior blow him up on the bus assassin movement that we've seen? What about all the jihads that we've seen go across? Yeah, well, you know what? If you get one, you got to take them all, don't you? So if one's a danger, they're all a danger. And now this puts us right in sync with Revelation chapter 17 and 18, where the Vatican, through this, the whore of Babylon, which interestingly enough brings us back to Semiramis. Semiramis was the queen of Babylon. She was Nimrod's wife. Nimrod was the first king of ancient Babylon. He was also the great-grandson of Noah. She had him murdered. There's a couple of different versions. Neither one of them are pretty. But she had him murdered, and she assumed the throne of the Sumerian Empire and took control of the building of the Tower of Babel, which, yes, does still exist, at least the very deep foundations of it. The first century historian Josephus actually visited the Tower of Babel over in that part of the world, over in what is Iraq now. However, when we look at the prophecy in Revelation 18, this harlot of all religion, the mother of Babylon the Great, and it was Semiramis, who was the goddess of the earth, the moon, and the stars. She was high priestess, and she was queen. She had all the bases covered. She literally had all the bases covered. And when she gave birth, she claimed it was Nimrod incarnate, who had already been dead for quite some time now when she became pregnant. She claimed it was a miraculous birth, and that this was Nimrod incarnate, that had come back to be with his people. And the child's name in Hebrew is Tammuz, and there's actually a Hebrew month to Tammuz. Interestingly, there's a Hebrew month named Tammuz, a connection back to the Sumerians and the star god child, or Set, as we might refer to him, or Horus. They were both star god children of Egypt. So here we have this God thing coming about, and here we are within these set of prophecies, all happening by these blood moons over the next basically 18 months. Coming out the other side, we should see the whore of Babylon saying, "I sit as a queen. No widow am I. No mourning shall I see." And it says after that, that's why it is in one day her judgment occurs. Now, when you look at what it says about the seven-headed, ten-horned wild beast that she is riding, the beast system, this is the scarlet-colored wild beast, a little bit different than the other two beasts of Revelation. This one, out of this one, arises an eighth king. And the eighth king reigns for 1 hour. Now, what can a government do in 1 hour? Not much. But according to the prophecy in Revelation, its primary focus is to destroy religion. It strips her naked, eats her fleshy parts, and burns the remains with fire. How do you do that? Well, let's see. You take their outer garments, strip them naked. You take their gold. You take the Jesuit gold. You strip them naked. Well, I'm sorry, I'm ahead of myself. First you strip them naked. You expose them for what they are. That's where you strip them naked. You bring them right down to the king's got no clothes. And that happened, that's where Kevin Annette comes in. You see, because they are found guilty of murdering children. They got to go. And once this catches on, and once the impetus is there and the reason has been set after the gold has been released, remember, got the money, after the gold has been released, then is where we wind up into this final last time period. And this should be after the Tetra moons. So, on these next 18 months, we should see the collapse of the debt system, the replacement of the debt system, and we should hear a declaration of peace and security. I would expect somewhere around his 33rd birthday on the 21st of June 2015, Prince William will ascend to the throne. After all, the Queen's been indicted in part of this problem as being head of the Anglican Church and running off with, what, 12 indigenous Canadian children, and they were never seen again. Okay, Elizabeth, what'd you do with the children? They were never seen again. But first they were made to kiss her feet. Isn't that how that goes, Alfred?
Yeah.
I believe I've got that story correct.
Yeah.
Yes. Oh, that account. Not story, account. Account. There's a difference. So here, you see, we're seeing this set up. And even when you look back at things that are mentioned within the protocol of the world, I'm starting to put two sentences together. In the protocol of the learned elders of Zion, this fits in what they want to accomplish, actually fits like a hand in a glove. I say it fits better than OJ's glove with what the prophecies in Revelation state. The prophecies in Revelation just get a little bit more personal. We've seen a lot of things, especially when you start taking in all the prophecies, because you've got a slew of prophets that have all issued declarations. If you go to the book of Isaiah, everybody in the Middle East has been given a prophecy of damnation. Read, interestingly enough, I think it's in Daniel. Boy, I'm sorry. I think it's actually Daniel, the 19th chapter. I have to go back. Sometimes I get them switched back and forth. It's the 19th chapter, 19th verse, where it talks about, I believe it is in Isaiah, where it talks about a monument being raised out of Egypt. Interestingly enough, in this same set of verses, starting with the whole 19th chapter, it's a pronunciation against Egypt. And when you look at everything that's gone on with the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt for the past, what, 2 years, 3 years? It's like, my goodness, talk about hitting home. So there are both minor and major prophecies working out on different levels that are all going off all over the world at this time. We want to look at the ones that we can identify the easiest, that are going to affect us the most. And that's what we're coming on now. So we're going to get a little reprieve. Don't fall asleep when they declare peace and security. You're still going to have to sign up for the B system. Now, the last mention of the blood moon prophecy is in Revelation. And it's in Revelation, the 6th chapter. Revelation is not written chronologically, by the way. There's several things happening at the same time within Revelation. But in the 6th chapter, starting with the 12th verse, John sees some really interesting things going on. He says it starts off that he sees this great earthquake occur, or actually the 6th seal, and this is opening up a seal of judgment. It says a great earthquake occurred, and the sun becomes as black as sackcloth made of hair, and the entire moon became as blood, and the stars of heaven fell to the earth, as when a fig tree shaken by a high wind drops its unripe figs. And the heavens departed as a scroll that is being rolled up, and every mountain and every island were removed from its place. Now, what thing could cause these events? A Planet X, Nibiru type event, man-made, interdimensional, alien-made, something of this nature passing by between the earth and the sun, causing this darkness as what happened during the Exodus. You see, and so now all of a sudden the scriptures are starting to come alive, and they become even more alive because this happens after the blood moon prophecy. First, we get to see it symbolically, and I'll touch back on there in a second. It's in Acts, the 2nd chapter. But John goes on. He says that he sees the kings of the earth, the high officials, the military commanders, the rich and the strong, every slave, every freeman, every person, hid themselves in the caves and among the rocks of the mountains. And they kept saying to the mountains and to the rock masses and to the deep underground military bunkers, fall over us and hide us from the face of the one seated on the throne and from the wrath of the Lamb. And you see, here we're back into this interdimensional judgment. And so there plays another segment. In Acts, the 2nd chapter, and I really like Acts, the 2nd chapter, starting with the 17th verse, because it's not just that I have all this knowledge. Yeah, I spent all my life learning it and then researching it and then writing a book about it. Letters to Earth, You Can Survive Armageddon. Sponsored by interdimensionals everywhere. Well, loyal interdimensionals everywhere. But when you go to Acts, the 18th chapter, I'm sorry, the 2nd chapter and the 17th verse, it says, in the last days, God says, I shall pour out some of my spirit on every sort of flesh, and your sons and your daughters will prophesy, and your young men will see visions, and your old men will dream dreams. And so there'll be an awakening. People will start to waken up, and they'll start to understand these things. Now, it's interesting. It says, out of your sons and daughters, talking to the people of power of the world, interestingly enough, not to the commoners, and also to the slaves who work for Yahweh or Yahuwah. Those people are the ones that are waking up. And so you've got people like you yourself, Alfred. You understand this on an interdimensional level. You understand this beyond the 3 dimensions and into the exopolitical situation that's going on here on planet Earth. You and I are not the only 2 people on the planet that are working toward this cause. All sorts of flesh will prophesy, will speak of this change. Interestingly enough, almost all of the prophecies from every culture are happening now. There's a reason. Now it goes on. It says, I will give wonders or evidence in the heavens above and signs on the earth below. Well, what's happening in the heavens above? 4 triad moons, all on Hebrew holidays, Hebrew high holidays, and 4 solar eclipses, 2 full, 2 partial, never before, both of them put together, never before happening in all 8 of them at the same, or during the same duration. I'd say it's unprecedented. I'd say it's biblical. I'd say it supports what is going to happen. signs in the heavens above. You know, they may have destroyed Comet Ison, but unless they destroy the moon, we're going to see 4 blood moons, Alfred, all on Hebrew high holidays, when their holiday is normally marked by a full regular moon, especially the harvest moon that takes place in the fall. Big bright moon when it gets up into the sky.
Now, do you think it's possible that these are markers of what we call ascension, or the transit of the planet from lower third to upper fourth density? I mean, from upper third to lower fourth density.
Alfred, you know, here's the problem. Everybody who espouses, and I'm sorry, no, I'm not sorry if I offend people at this point. We're getting too close, and there's no time to screw around anymore.
Yeah.
We all have the power to ascend already.
Right.
It's utilizing the alpha, the theta, and the delta.
Yeah.
This is what puts us in synchronization with the very multiverse itself. And people saying, oh, well, you got to ascend to do that. No. You sit down, you relax, and you meditate.
Right. So that what occurs is that along with in this 2014 to 2015 period, through the 4 lunar eclipses and the 2 solar eclipses, that plus all the other cosmic forces that are happening, those aid the expansion of consciousness of humanity, and so it's all positive.
Well, yeah. Essentially, Alfred, you see, what's going to happen is that people are going to go back, and people are already doing this because people are telling me that they're doing this. They're going back and they're listening to all the interviews that you and I have done.
Really?
Yeah, seriously. I have people telling me this at least once or sometimes twice a week on Facebook. You know, I get a lot of trolls anymore. Oh boy, I'm bombarded with trolls and girls who want to meet and marry me. You know, it's like, come on, this ain't a dating site. Go away. So if you look at my block list, I had 15 in one day 2 weeks ago. It was like, oh my goodness. Okay. And these aren't people that are seeking knowledge and understanding.
Maybe these are just bots. Maybe these are just bots, by the way.
This is some person sitting down at a computer in Ghana or in the Philippines or in Nigeria saying, oh, I want to be your girlfriend. I live in Florida. You want to come be with me again?
I see.
You know, it's like, go away. I don't have time for this. And that's part of the problem. We can't be distracted by anything. And so when you get into this ascension, idea of ascension, it's ascending consciously. Right. And I'm going to tell you what, Alfred, when people see the collapse of the petrodollar in the coming months, if they still have electricity, they are going to say, wow, Peter and Alfred were right. They talked about this for 2 years. They told us this crap was going to happen. Oh my God, it's time to wake up. I hope that they come to this realization and we see a mass awakening which will bring forth the prophecy in Revelation, the 7th chapter, I think it's the 14th verse, which says there would be a great crowd from every nation, from every tongue, that would come to understand the truth and would essentially join, leave the human race and join the loving human family.
Amen.
And that's what it's all about, joining that loving human family.
So the outcome of this is the loving human family.
Yeah.
Be that 2017, 2018, 2020, 2025.
Yeah, that is the outcome. Now, the downside is, Alfred, that there's going to be a lot of mayhem between now and then, especially, you go back to the events which happened in Egypt. If this was a Nibiru-type event, and if there is a Nibiru-type event coming, you can be sure that the White House, the Vatican, and the Crown of England aren't going to tell us. Neither is Putin. They've been ordered to keep their mouths shut and play the game.
Although there were Planet X billboards in the middle of Red Square in the 1990s.
And yes,
no, really.
And for a fact, Moscow has doubled the amount of underground bunkers that it is building.
Yeah.
Yeah, and in let's see, in Switzerland, in every home, it's mandatory to have an underground bunker.
Yeah.
Wait, didn't I just read this that the people would be calling out to the rock masses and to hide them?
Yeah,
See, and so now prophecy is starting to come alive. And now some people will see this beforehand. They'll see our efforts and they'll recognize us and they'll say, oh my goodness, I got to support this effort. I got to do something to wake other people up. Yeah, you know, if people think you're crazy, it's okay.
Now
you'll get over it. So will they.
Yeah. Now you yourself have talked about that, right?
About which?
About what plans you would have.
Oh, absolutely. And you know, here's where my focus is now, Alfred. Essentially, since I've published Letters to Earth, You Can Survive Armageddon, I've publicized, I've used as many media outlets as the system would allow me to use, and as my own knowledge would allow me to use. The most, the best dynamic for me became Facebook. So I would spend a lot of time researching, keeping track of what's going on, and posting a lot of information on Facebook. I'd spend a considerable amount of time there. As a matter of fact, my kids, who are mostly grown and on their own now, came to know me as being attached. I've already started the transhumanist agenda. There's a computer at the end of my fingers that never seems to leave. So I've got to change that paradigm for me, because a man who doesn't follow his own advice, don't listen to him.
Yeah.
If he ain't taking his advice, don't you take his advice. So I got to take my own advice. I got to spend less time on the computer. I have to get away from the RF transmissions that I surround myself with every day in multitude. The wireless, the cell phone, the smartphone, the smart meter, the computer, everything. And I need to make an effort, a personal effort, to go back to nature, to get my rhythm, my harmony more in sync with the planet. You know what this is, Alfred? This is our magnetic force, our magnetic field. You see, once we're in harmony with everything that's going on, now we can start to feel. And this is a time when we have to learn to trust our feelings. It's a spiritual awakening. You know, this isn't fight or flight. This is becoming spiritually awake and aware. It has nothing to do with rapture. It has nothing to do with ascension. You want to be raptured? Hey, I ain't going to see you after the paradigm shift of Armageddon, I promise you. You want to ascend? Well, you know, it's interesting that there's a scripture that say that the people that remain are going to be picking up a lot of bones. I didn't write the Bible. I'm just bringing the news. So, yeah, 2/3 of this planet is pretty well doomed, Alfred. My guess is that it's actually closer to about 80%, because the 2/3 that want to remain ignorant, and you have the support staff for all the governments that have a ticket to the deep underground military bunkers.
So that leaves us with the Georgia Guidestones.
How about that? Interesting.
Well, look, we are this is actually just about the longest Exopolitics TV interview on record. So tell me, what would you like to leave our viewers with? Like what thoughts?
Okay, stay tuned to the Alfred and Peter show, because there's more episodes coming. Number one.
Okay,
I'm
number one.
Not just vanish off the face of the earth. While I will be spending less time.
But we're going to tie you to talking points in future shows.
Absolutely, not a problem. Not a problem. What I am doing personally.
Okay.
Whatever, I've started a savings program for myself, Alfred, something that I haven't had the ability to do with all the different attacks over the years. I started a savings program. Whatever little money I can scrape together, I buy a piece of silver. I buy a U.S. minted American Eagle dollar. It cost me 30, well, about 25 Federal
Yeah.
Reserve notes. So I
Yeah,
buy a
yeah.
piece of silver.
That's
Now,
good.
that's after I make sure that I've got my foodstuffs up to snuff
Yeah.
and that I've got a supply of drinking water.
Oh,
That's
yeah.
most important.
Totally.
Now, what my personal goals are, Alfred, is I said I want to get back to nature. Once upon a time, you could find me in the middle of the woods on a small stream with a fishing rod in my hand for hours. And sometimes I would fish, sometimes I would sit and meditate, and sometimes I would watch nature. I would have wild animals coming up to me. Ah, and when they don't know you, they don't want to be petted, but they come up and they look and say, "Why are you
Yeah.
here?"
Yeah, yeah.
You know, why? And so you sit there. And this is a time when to flush out, that I am personally using to flush out all of the false magnetic fields that they hit us with,
Right.
everything from my cell phone to HARP. Now, I can't do much about HARP, but everything that I can control, I want to remove myself from.
Yeah.
And eventually, my goal is to remove myself from the electric grid altogether.
Yeah.
Now, it's great that I live in Pennsylvania because all I have to do is become Amish. And you say, boom, I'm there. But it's a long process to become Amish, and I really don't endorse any religion because this is a spiritual awakening. It's
Right.
not a religious awakening.
Right.
Religion is part of the problem, and according to the scriptures and according to the prophecies, religion is going to be done away with. Boom. End.
Yeah.
So now it's the final thing that it comes down to is interdimensional, because the one thing which we haven't talked about directly is disclosure.
Disclosure, meaning what?
Alien disclosure. You know,
Okay.
everybody wants to know when the aliens are going to show up. Look for this to happen at the end of the blood moon tetrad. Look for this to
Okay.
happen the
You
fourth
did this
quarter 2015.
Okay.
I would look for the collapse to come somewhere the end of the second quarter this year. Certainly by the third quarter. The Pope is going to Jerusalem in May. Look for the collapse to come sometime after he gets back to the Vatican.
Right.
Watch for Ukraine to continue to escalate economically with sanctions between the EU, the United States, and Russia.
Right.
Watch for oil prices and food prices to increase. If you have a 401k or a long-term savings plan, as a billionaire from Berlin who went through the Great Depression of Germany after the First World War told me, I once owned 6,800,000,000 marks and it wasn't worth the paper it was written on. You cannot eat paper, nor can you eat gold or silver. Number one priority, food and water. Become independent. Become independent. If it means going down the path to remove yourself from the Queen's role of ownership, yeah, you can take that road too. But this is going to change. This is going to be very dynamic very quickly.
Okay.
You ever notice it's no longer 24 hours to the day. It's down to about 22. Sometimes it feels like it's 18 hours a day. You notice that, Al?
Yeah. Yeah, you get up and it's time to go to bed. Now, let me ask you one question. What are you going to be doing on the first blood moon on April 14, 15, 2014? What are you going to be doing on that day? As something special. I mean, if you're going to do something special that day.
April 14th, after sundown, not only starts the, you asked the greatest question. Out of all of them, you asked the greatest question. After sundown, started the Passover, and so in 33 CE, during a time of the 4 blood moons, and a possible 1 solar eclipse happening on the day that he was actually put to death, Jesus gathered with the 12 in the upper room, and they held the Passover. After the Passover, he dismissed Judas, the unfaithful one, who went and betrayed him that night, and he held a promise with his 11 faithful disciples, who then became the brothers of Christ, or became the first of the immortals. And in that promise, he passed a cup. Well, first, he broke a loaf. He prayed. I'm sorry. He prayed over a loaf of bread, flat bread. It was what they used for the Passover. He prayed over it. He said, "This means my body, the covenant for which I am purchasing this earth and mankind from." And he said a prayer over it. He broke it into 12 pieces. He passed it, and they ate it. He said, "Eat. This means my body." The actual covenant that is made, the legal binding agreement that is made by his blood sacrifice, which comes next. Because he also took a vessel of wine. This is where the Holy Grail comes from, or at least one of the beliefs. He says a blessing over it. He says, "This means my blood. Drink from it, because through this you have everlasting life." And he says, "Do this in memory of me until I return."
Aha.
Aha! So if we're supposed to do this in memory of him until he returns, what is the most likely date for the King of Kings and Lord of Lords to show up with the armies of the multiverse? Because he is no longer Jesus Christ. He's no longer Jesus Christ. He came in peace the first time. Remember, he rode the colt of an ass into Jerusalem, a sign of peace. When you look at the symbology in Revelation 19, he is riding on a white horse. Horses signify war. Who is he going to destroy? As above, so below. The beast system, which destroys the religious system and all of its supporters, along with all of the interdimensional, extraterrestrial, alien life forms, which have given the human race the technology to annihilate ourselves and create biological abominations and technical, and bring about the end of the biological human race through technology. That's what they've given us. And they've given us good impetus to do so in Fukushima. It's going to take 35 more years to fix that. It's been burned for 3 years. At least the Russians had the courtesy to cover over Chernobyl. Oh, we don't know what to do. It's burning. Yeah, And you can change all that just by the vibrations, but it takes more technology than what we have. However, the King of Kings has got the technology. Everything works by vibration. And so essentially, we need to create that bond of love, following the greatest commandment. Jesus said the greatest commandment was to love Yahweh or Yahuwah, your God, with your whole heart, soul, and mind. Interesting, heart, soul, and mind. And to love your neighbor as you do yourself. Because eventually, once you form that bond of love, therein solidifies the future human family. Bound together in the third dimension in flesh, bound together in the other 7 dimensions of the multiverse, and maybe more, in spirit. And so we're going to witness the extermination of the human race, which has turned this planet into one pit that we can no longer survive or live upon successfully for any length of time. This paradigm is coming to an end. The new paradigm, the birth of the human family, is what we will achieve through the understanding of what is written in the scriptures and the bond of love that we can have with each other. And folks, that bond starts on the family level. I personally want to spend more time with my kids. I'm a grandfather now.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Been a grandfather for some time. It's interesting. I don't spend a lot of time with the little critter. He's hooked up right now to his feeding supply. But, he's going to get older. We're going fishing. So, it's time to get ready for the next generation and plan our future, Alfred.
Yeah.
It's not a time of doom and gloom. Yep, it's coming. We're going to go into a car wreck. Have you ever been in a car accident?
Not a serious one.
How about if they took you to I've been in more than I want to think about. But, you know, you get over it. You ever break a bone? You ever get hurt, you
Yes.
know,
Yes.
or you get sick and there's that recovery time?
Yeah.
Well, we're going to go through recovery time.
Yeah.
Probably about a 40-year recovery time. It'll take that time for us after the paradigm change in order to get to that point where our DNA is pretty close to perfection. We are starting a whole new chapter in the future of human history. And it's in this paradigm change where we get back to the birth of the human family, where the families come together, that we are brought forward into perfection, and then go back to what it says in the Gospels about the last perfect human to be on the planet, and that was Jesus. What could he do? Oh, he could heal the sick, make the blind so they can see, the lame so they could walk. He fed thousands with leftovers. He could walk on water. He commanded the weather. He turned water into wine. Boy, how handy is that when you're thirsty? You know, hey, it's a party time. Let's think of the power and the vibration. When you look at the account, it says, "Well, God's Holy Spirit fell upon Jesus like in the form of a dove." You go to Revelation, it says the house of God, the tent of God, is going to be with mankind. We're going to get hit with a house. So think of the spiritual dynamic that we will be reconnected. Right now, we've been unplugged. Every time we want to connect with our spiritual side, we got to stop what we're doing. We got to sit back. We got to meditate. We got to think about it. We got to reconnect that plug. If we don't reconnect it, we don't have a future. And it's just that simple. That plug has to be connected back to the multiverse, back to the earth, and back to each other. And it's got to be done in a state of love, not in a state of fight and flight.
You know, Peter, I really want to thank you. We've come to the end of this segment, but I really want to thank you for taking your time to be with us now. And we really look forward to you joining us from time to time as events develop over the course of the next moons and succeeding epochs and succeeding eras.
Yeah, let's hope we're around for a good long time, Alfred. You know, here's the honest truth, Alfred. If we survive the next 36 months, yeah, I'm going out on a limb here, but if we survive the next 36 months, we never have to worry about dying on this planet.
Yeah, so 36 months is 3 years. Is that it?
Yeah, about 3 years.
Yeah. So that's 2017.
Yeah, pretty much. And here's the thing: this could be all over and done with by the end of 2016.
Yeah.
You got to leave a little fudge factor in there for calculations, because different people use different.
I understand.
Settings. But we're in this time. That's why Jesus said, "Look, only the Father knows the day and the hour.
Yeah.
The rest of you guys have to watch." He said, "Watch what's going on." Actually, he said, "You know, those of you who know don't need any explanation." But here it is. Watch the events of the world.
Right.
Watch what is going on, and when you see these things occur, then you know. Now, the next big thing that we can expect to happen after the fall of the dollar, watch for the Vatican to make a move on Jerusalem. They've already bought up 60% of the city.
Wow. Well, on that note, thank you so much. And
Alfred, my pleasure. And folks, go read Letters to Earth. You can survive Armageddon.
Yeah, so
it's a paradigm shift. It's not the end of the world.
Yeah, yeah. So where can people get that?
Alfred, people can go to my webpage right now, www.peterkling.com, and they can download a PDF copy of it and read it tonight.
Great.
Or today. Or they can go to their bookstore, barnesandnoble.com, amazon.com. It's available in hardcover, softcover, Kindle, ebook, and PDF.
Everything. So it's available. It's out. Great.
Yeah, get online, type in, and away you go. You'll find it.
Here we go.
We've changed the cover. We've changed the cover to it.
Oh,
we don't have the updated cover. That's the old. That's the old.
This
paradigm.
is the old one. This is the old paradigm. We'll bring it to the new.
Cover. Yeah. So as a matter of fact, I'm just wondering. Well, go to.
Yeah, I'll just go to Amazon, Kindle, whatever.
You'll see the new paradigm cover there. Go to Facebook. Great. You'll see the new paradigm.
Beautiful.
It's a paradise. It's a beautiful future Earth.
Great.
That's what we have to look forward to. I wanted to put people beyond the hump.
Beyond the hump.
Absolutely.
Amen.
Amen.
On that note, thank you so much.
Alfred, stay safe. They don't like the truth. Stay safe and a safe trip to Kuala Lumpur. Find out what you can find.
No. Listen, you know, I am no longer a judge there.
Stay safe, my friend. there's more to come.
Exactly.
More to come.
Okay,
anyway.
good enough then. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Take care.